Welcome back to the channel, and I'm here today to review my Epiphone Les Paul Traditional Pro 3, which it says right there on the truss rod cover. Epiphone. It's a great guitar. So, a little backstory, my history with Les Pauls. This is my fourth actual Les Paul. I had an Epiphone, a beautiful Epiphone Les Paul I bought with high school graduation money many years ago that I really liked, but I ended up putting a DiMarzio Steve Vai Evolution bridge pickup in it, and other stuff, and it was a really nice guitar, especially for the money, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. Several years later, I bought a Gibson Les Paul traditional 60s tribute or something like that. It was one that was just mahogany, no maple cap, just wine red, and it sounded amazing, but it is my personal experience with some Gibsons having horrific quality control. It had the sharpest, not fret sprout, the frets were actually sharp. They would cut your fingers. It was horrible. I mean, we're talking like every fret was about an eighth of an inch over the side of the fretboard. And it sounded amazing, though. I believe it had burst buckers in it. It was probably the best sounding Les Paul I've ever played. And it had a big scratch in it, so I wanted to keep it because I hate sending things back, but I sent it back for Musician's Friend. That was a 2014 model. I ended up getting a 2015 Gibson Les Paul Studio, which had the G-Force robot tuners, as they call them, the brass nut, and it had 57 Classic pickup in the neck, a 57 Plus in the bridge, and it was a really nice guitar, and I really liked it, but I never really felt a tremendous bond with it, though I really loved it. There was not a thing wrong with it, and I ended up selling it a couple years ago when I was moving and it was probably the one guitar that I was the combination most willing to part with and would get the most for at the time. And I hate that I had to get rid of it because I really like that guitar, but it never was just one I bonded with and had this great connection with. And I know 2015, in retrospect, ended up being one of the least liked years for the Les Paul in modern times. They made the neck slightly wider. It had Les Paul's signature on the headstock for what would have been his 100th birthday. But I still needed a Les Paul style guitar when I was recording my album. And that is how I ended up getting this. I got it for a while back on Musician's Friend for $3.99. It's one of those guitars, at the time at least, that it seems like about every other month, in just this color, they would put on sale. And I think it has been replaced since then with the traditional Pro 4, which I have not played, but just looking at the specs, let me warn you, this is a much nicer guitar if you can still find one. I'll run through some of the features now. This is really for someone who doesn't care if the headstock says Gibson or Epiphone. I think truly the ultimate practical player's Les Paul for the money, because it has so many features, just packed to the gills with features that are player oriented, to the point many of which I hardly ever, if ever, use. But first and foremost, it is one of the few Epiphones that has Gibson pickups. This is a 57 Classic. I think they call this a Super 57, which is basically a 57 Plus that's made for coil tapping or splitting. And I can't remember which one this is. It makes the humbucker sound like a single coil. I know they're technically different, but that's not a feature I'm terribly interested in. But this one does it, and I'll go over that a little bit. But it's basically a 57 Plus, which is ever so nominally hotter, to the point it doesn't really make a difference. Set up for coil splitting and or tapping, whichever one. And they sound great. This is basically what I had in my Gibson Les Paul Studio. And one of the points of warning, not saying they're bad pickups, but I've seen on the various music store websites the successor to this guitar, the 4, and again this is the 3, just has the Epiphone Alnico Pro pickups, which from what I hear on YouTube reviews are fine pickups, but these are actual Gibson pickups. Have these great vintage style knobs here, I believe, and I'll go through it. That splits the bridge. This splits the neck. This, it's kind of hard to get under. It has a slight downfall of this guitar where the top is carved, but that puts these out of phase for that Peter Green sound, which is great. And then this is a handy feature. I talk about player-centric features. That is a volume boost. And it does require for that a 9-volt battery, but it's never ran out on me. I don't use it very much. But that's a great feature. It really does work. I'll demonstrate it in some of the sound samples that are coming up. And again, this is the cosmetic thing. I've never had one with zebra pickups before, and I really like that. Otherwise, the construction is a typical Les Paul. Mahogany body, mahogany neck, of course binding on this one. Maple cap with, of course, this is a very nice maple veneer. So basically you have a piece of maple, which you can't tell, obviously, what it's figuring and patterns are like, but it's a really nice veneer placed over top of that. Indian Laurel fretboard, which again I really like. And as I've said in many of my other videos, it's my favorite rosewood alternative. And return to what might be my favorite difference about this guitar from the Les Pauls I've had in the past. You can see it somewhat. Of course, it's hard to see. This is a satin finish. This is a barely there satin finish. Every other Les Paul I've had has had, whether it be poly or nitro, a gloss finish on the neck. That is one thing, and part of it I think is just psychological. Even in other guitars I've reviewed on this channel that I love, there is just something for me on typically a Fender guitar, seeing the maple wood grain and the way the Fender satin and gloss finishes feel, and it's just totally a feel thing. And this does not have, this barely has any finish at all on the back of the neck, and it feels fantastic. And that is one big plus for it over every other Les Paul and Gibson style guitar that I've owned as a Fender fan. And I know Fender makes, like, well, for example, and I just truly randomly had this sitting here, this Esquire, which I love, and there's a review of it on the channel. Very thick gloss back there, but it's very smooth. But something about psychologically for me, seeing the wood, I just really like. But this one just feels great. It's a nice weight. I can't remember exactly. I think this specific one weighed about 8.5 pounds. And again, oh, and another good thing, they're not locking, but those are genuine Grover tuners. And it's just a really nice guitar. It truly is like they decided, let's make an Epiphone packed with all these player friendly features that in a price point, I believe these were $600 full retail. Again, I got this one for $400, and if you can find one now, it's still a great deal. Again, its successor, the 4, still looks like a nice guitar, and it's more affordable. It's not the same price full retail as this was, but this is for if you want a Les Paul style guitar that you're not afraid to take on stage or take somewhere to the point that it would be the end of the world if it got stolen. Because sort of the Gibson equivalent of this is about $2,000, and it's actually one of the, maybe the cheapest full-fledged Les Paul that you can get binding on in the Gibson line. But anyway, it's about $1,300 more, and this one is just wonderful. So now I'm going to go through some sound samples, show you what this can do with some various amps and pedals, and then I'll come back here for my final thoughts. hope those sound samples were helpful. This really is a great sounding guitar. These Gibson 57 pickups, which are vintage in output, just sound great. And I'm confident in the one sound sample. When I kicked in the boost here, you could really tell the volume difference. So if, say, you were playing live and getting ready to play a solo, that would probably give you all the volume boost you need. I do want to make sure I'm clear in something I said earlier. This is a, as it says on the headstock, Les Paul Traditional Pro 3 Plus. There is a Pro 3 that's not a Plus, and it does not have the Gibson 57 humbuckers. It has regular Epiphone humbuckers. So keep in mind, this is the Plus model. When I was speaking about how this compares to the traditional Pro 4, the regular traditional Pro 3 to 4 would be a more direct comparison. However, based on my research, there is no traditional Pro 4 Plus, at least not yet. So if you see a traditional Pro 4, and especially if it's not maybe in the future a Plus model, make sure you keep in mind that you are not going to be getting the Gibson 57 pickups. And if you see a traditional Pro 3 that's not the Plus, you are not going to be getting the Gibson pickups. You're going to be getting Epiphone pickups, which are fine pickups, but they're not these Gibson pickups, which I think are like $200 for a set aftermarket, which I paid $400 for this guitar from Musician's Friend, brand new. The pickups alone mean that I paid, and again, I know this is inexact and not how, when you're on a large-scale manufacturing level, how it goes, but basically I bought the pickups and paid $200 for the rest of the guitar, and that is amazing given what a wonderful guitar this is. I absolutely love it. It's probably my favorite overall Les Paul that I've owned. There were things about the others I mentioned earlier in the video that I liked better, but all around, this is probably my favorite, and I don't plan on getting rid of it anytime soon. And again, that neck feel really does it for me compared to the others. Again, in terms of alternatives, there's always the Gibson version, which, as I said in my SG Special video, I'm sure the Gibson version is a better guitar than this. Is it a $1,300 or $1,400 better guitar? Keeping in mind I've never played it, I can't see how it could be. If you have the money for it and that's what you want, go for it. But this one, and I do think again that that one is the cheapest Gibson Les Paul I can think of that actually has binding as this one does. But again, for something like this, you can get something that looks just about as good, if not better, keeping in mind this is a veneer, not an actual top that you're seeing with the flame here. I mean, I don't think there's any comparison from a value perspective. Again, if you can afford and that's what you want, go for it, but I really can't think of a better Les Paul style guitar for a player than this one. It has all these great switching features, the boost, the split, the out of phase. You get a decent single coil sound, as you heard. This is a guitar that you can take to a gig. It'd be the only electric guitar you take and you would be fine. And also, it's that you never want to have one stolen or lost or damaged. It's not so expensive that you would be worried to death if you had to turn your back on it for a minute or two. It's and again, if you had a $2,500 Gibson, you would probably be keeping a close eye on it. Whereas with this, again, not that you'd want to lose it, and I love this one, but you wouldn't feel that financial heartbreak. So there really is, keeping in mind the relative strengths and weaknesses of Les Pauls in general, nothing about this guitar I do not like, other than maybe the out of phase switch is hard to pull out. And I think I did it in the video. You have to kind of slide a pick under there to get it for sure. And I almost never use that, so it doesn't really bother me. But if you find one of these, I strongly encourage you to pick it up. It is it appears to be sold out at most of the main line retailers, brand new, but you can find them on Reverb easily. I would highly suggest you take a look at it. Again, I'm not a collector, I'm a player, and for a player, I can't imagine a better value Les Paul. So I hope this was helpful. Please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And until next time, keep on rocking.